My husband Aaron left me with $300,000 in debt and ran off with his secretary Veronica, leaving me with nothing but foreclosure notices and bankruptcy papers. As I sat staring at the eviction letter, my business partner Jennifer calmly said, "Don't worry. I already started fixing this." 6 months later, I owned his penthouse, his company, and every asset he thought he'd hidden from me. The morning everything fell apart started like any other Tuesday in my comfortable suburban life. I was sitting in the kitchen of what I thought was our dream home in Westfield Heights. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Drinking coffee from the expensive Italian espresso machine Aaron had insisted we needed, when the doorbell rang with an urgency that made my stomach clench. Standing at my front door was a man in a crisp navy suit holding a leather briefcase, his expression serious enough to drain the color from my face before he even spoke. "Mrs. May Richardson?" he asked, though he clearly already knew who I was. "I'm here to serve you with official notice of debt collection proceedings. Your husband, Aaron Richardson, has defaulted on multiple business loans totaling $300,000, and as his spouse, you are legally responsible for these debts." The papers he handed me felt impossibly heavy in my trembling hands. Page after page of legal documents, bank statements, and loan agreements I had never seen before, all bearing Aaron's signature alongside mine. Signatures I definitely didn't remember making. My name was on everything: joint liability, personal guarantees, collateral agreements using our home as security. Every single document made it clear that Aaron had somehow made me responsible for debts I knew nothing about. But that wasn't even the worst part. As I stood there trying to process the financial nightmare that had just landed on my doorstep, the debt collector's expression softened slightly, as if he was about to deliver news that would be even more devastating than the money problems. "Ma'am, I'm required to inform you that your husband contacted our office yesterday to notify us of his change of address. He's relocated to Miami with a woman named Veronica Hayes, and he's explicitly stated that he will not be contributing to the resolution of these debts." The world seemed to tilt sideways as his words sank in. Aaron hadn't just left me with crushing debt. He had abandoned me entirely, running off with his secretary to start a new life while leaving me to face the complete destruction of everything we had built together. The man handed me another envelope, this one containing Aaron's forwarding address and a brief note that made my blood run cold. "The business assets have been transferred. You'll need to handle the remaining obligations. I wish you the best." I stumbled back into the house, my legs barely supporting me as the full weight of the betrayal crashed down. Aaron hadn't just been unfaithful, he had been systematically destroying our financial future while planning his escape. The home we had lived in for 8 years, the one where we had hosted dinner parties and celebrated anniversaries, was apparently mortgaged to the hilt to cover business debts I had never heard of. The cars in our driveway, the furniture, even my jewelry, everything was listed as collateral in these loan agreements, but the most shocking revelation came when I called our bank to check our accounts. Every single account had been emptied 3 days ago. The joint savings account where we had been building our retirement fund, the checking account I used for household expenses, even the small emergency fund I had been secretly contributing to for years, all of it was gone. Aaron had cleaned out everything before disappearing, leaving me with literally nothing but mounting debt and a house that was about to be foreclosed on. I spent the next several hours in a state of complete shock, calling everyone I could think of who might be able to explain what had happened. Aaron's office said he had resigned suddenly, effective immediately, with no forwarding contact information. His friends claimed they had no idea where he was or what his plans were. His family acted like they had never heard of any financial problems, though I detected something in his sister's voice that suggested she knew more than she was admitting. The isolation was suffocating. In the span of one morning, I had gone from being a woman with a stable marriage and comfortable life to being completely alone and facing financial ruin. The house felt enormous and empty around me, every room filled with memories of a life that had apparently been built on lies. I couldn't eat, couldn't think clearly, could barely function as the reality of my situation became clearer with each phone call and each document I examined. That's when Jennifer arrived. My business partner in the small consulting firm we had started together 3 years ago walked into my kitchen like she owned the place, took one look at the papers scattered across my counter, and immediately started organizing them into neat piles. Jennifer had always been the more practical one between us, the detail-oriented partner who handled the financial side of our business while I focused on client relationships and creative strategy. "How bad is it?" she asked, her voice calm and matter-of-fact as she began reading through the debt collection notices. I explained everything through tears, the $300,000 in hidden debts, Aaron's escape to Miami with Veronica, the emptied bank accounts, the fact that our home was apparently collateral for business loans I had never approved. I expected her to be as shocked and devastated as I was. Instead, Jennifer just nodded thoughtfully, as if she was processing information she had been expecting to receive. "May," she said quietly, setting down the papers and looking directly into my eyes, "don't worry about any of this. I already started fixing it." The words didn't make sense. How could she have started fixing anything? I had just learned about these problems myself an hour ago. How could Jennifer possibly know what to do about debt collection proceedings and foreclosure notices and hidden business loans? She was my business partner, not a financial attorney or debt specialist. But there was something in her voice, a confidence that was completely at odds with the chaos surrounding us. She wasn't panicked or confused or overwhelmed like I was. If anything, she seemed almost prepared. Like she had been waiting for this conversation. Like she had already thought through what needed to happen next. "Jennifer, what do you mean you started fixing it?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "I just found out about all of this. How could you possibly have known what Aaron was doing?" She smiled then, a small, knowing smile that sent a chill down my spine. "May, there's a lot you don't know about what's been happening. But I promise you, by the time this is over, Aaron is going to regret every single choice he made. Trust me." And in that moment, staring at my business partner who somehow seemed to know more about my husband's betrayal than I did, I realized that the story I thought I was living, the story of a woman destroyed by her husband's abandonment, was only the beginning of something much more complex and much more dangerous than I could have ever imagined. The coffee in my cup had gone cold hours ago, but I couldn't stop staring at Jennifer's face, searching for some explanation of how she could possibly know anything about Aaron's financial schemes. The woman sitting across from me at my kitchen table looked exactly like the business partner I had worked with for 3 years. Same auburn hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, same no-nonsense blazer, same reading glasses perched on her nose as she methodically sorted through legal documents. But the confidence in her voice when she said she had already started fixing it belonged to someone I didn't recognize. "Jennifer, you're scaring me," I said, my voice shaking. "What? Do you mean you started fixing this? I literally just found out about these debts an hour ago. How could you possibly have known what Aaron was doing behind my back?" She looked up from the foreclosure notice she was examining, her expression unreadable. "May, I need you to stay calm and listen to me carefully. Aaron didn't hide this as well as he thought he did. Some of us have been paying attention." The way she said "some of us" made my stomach clench. Who was us? What kind of network was she talking about? I had always thought Jennifer and I were close friends as well as business partners. We had built our consulting firm from nothing, working late nights in her apartment, celebrating our first major client with cheap champagne, supporting each other through the challenges of running a small business. But the woman sitting in my kitchen seemed to know things about my marriage that I didn't know myself. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. "I don't understand," I whispered. "Are you saying you knew Aaron was planning to leave me? You knew about the debt and you didn't tell me?" Jennifer set down the papers and leaned back in her chair, studying my face with an intensity that made me uncomfortable. "May, what would you have done if I had come to you 6 months ago and told you that your husband was having an affair with his secretary and systematically destroying your financial future? Would you have believed me?" The question hit me like a physical blow. 6 months ago, I had been completely convinced that Aaron and I had a solid marriage. Yes, he had been working longer hours, and yes, he had seemed distracted and stressed, but I had attributed that to the pressure of his real estate development business. The idea that he was planning to abandon me with hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt while running off with Veronica would have seemed absolutely ridiculous. "You should have told me," I said, but even as the words left my mouth, I knew Jennifer was right. I wouldn't have believed her. I would have defended Aaron, accused her of being jealous or vindictive, maybe even ended our business partnership over it. The realization that I had been so blind, so naive, so completely trusting of a man who was systematically betraying me, made me feel sick. "I did try to warn you, May. Remember when I suggested we should keep our business finances completely separate from your personal accounts? Remember when I recommended that you get copies of all the loan documents Aaron was asking you to sign? You told me I was being paranoid." The memory came flooding back. 3 months ago, Jennifer had indeed suggested that I should be more careful about the financial documents Aaron brought home for me to sign. She had even offered to have her lawyer friend review some of the paperwork. But Aaron had been so dismissive of her concerns, laughing about how Jennifer didn't understand the real estate business, and I had sided with my husband. I had actually been annoyed with Jennifer for questioning Aaron's judgment. "Oh God," I breathed. "You tried to protect me and I didn't listen." "That's not important now," Jennifer said firmly. "What matters is what we do next. Aaron thinks he's gotten away with something, but he doesn't understand who he's dealing with. He made a very serious mistake when he decided to destroy your life." There was something in her tone that made me look at her more carefully. Jennifer had always been the quieter, more reserved one in our partnership. She handled the books, managed client contracts, dealt with the legal aspects of our business while I focused on presentations and relationship building. But the woman sitting across from me now had an edge I had never seen before. A coldness. That was completely foreign to the Jennifer I thought I knew. "What kind of mistake?" I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to hear the answer. Jennifer smiled, and for the first time since she had arrived, she looked genuinely pleased. "Aaron thinks he's dealing with a naive housewife who will crumble under the pressure of debt collection and foreclosure proceedings. He has no idea that his wife's business partner has been documenting every suspicious transaction, every forged signature, every illegal transfer of assets for the past 6 months." My heart started beating faster. "What are you saying? What kind of documentation?" "Bank records showing that Aaron has been transferring money to offshore accounts. Email communications between Aaron and Veronica discussing their plans to relocate assets before abandoning you with the debt. Security camera footage from his office showing him accessing your personal information and forging your signature on loan documents. Phone records proving that he's been coordinating with financial institutions to ensure that you would be held responsible for debts you never agreed to take on." I stared at her in complete shock. The level of preparation and surveillance she was describing was far beyond anything a normal business partner would undertake. This wasn't just Jennifer being cautious or protective. This was someone who had been conducting a systematic investigation of my husband's activities. "Jennifer, how did you get all of this information? Some of what you're describing sounds like espionage." She laughed softly, but there was no humor in it. "May, you're going to learn that there are a lot of things about me that you don't know." Just like there were a lot of things about Aaron that you didn't know. The difference is that my secrets are going to save you, and his secrets were going to destroy you. The kitchen fell silent, except for the ticking of the clock on the wall. I felt like I was looking at a complete stranger, someone who had been hiding in plain sight for 3 years while I built a business and a friendship with her. The documents scattered across my table suddenly seemed less important than the growing realization that everyone in my life had been keeping secrets from me. "Who are you really, Jennifer?" I asked quietly. She stood up and began gathering the papers into a neat stack. "I'm the person who's going to make sure that Aaron pays for every single thing he's done to you. And May? When I'm finished with him, he's going to wish he had never heard your name." I met Aaron Richardson on what I thought was the luckiest day of my life. It was a rainy Thursday evening in October, and I was running late for a networking event downtown, clutching my portfolio and trying to navigate the crowded hotel lobby in heels that were already giving me blisters. I had just started my freelance marketing consulting business 6 months earlier, and these industry events were my lifeline to potential clients. Even though I dreaded the awkward small talk and forced enthusiasm, I was rushing toward the registration table when I collided directly with a man carrying 2 glasses of wine, sending red liquid splashing across his expensive white shirt. I was mortified, stammering apologies while frantically searching my purse for tissues, but Aaron just laughed. Not the polite, strained laugh of someone trying to hide their annoyance, but genuine amusement that made his whole face light up. "Well, this is definitely the most interesting introduction I've had all week," he said, extending his hand despite the wine stain spreading across his chest. "Aaron Richardson, and you just saved me from having to make small talk with my ex-business partner over there." He was charming in a way that felt effortless, the kind of man who could make everyone in a room feel like they were the most fascinating person he had ever met. Aaron was tall and confident, with the sort of easy smile that suggested he had never encountered a problem he couldn't solve. Within 10 minutes of our collision, he had convinced me to skip the networking event entirely and join him for dinner, at a quiet restaurant around the corner. That night, Aaron told me about his real estate development company, Richardson Properties, which he had built from nothing over the past 8 years. He specialized in commercial properties and luxury residential developments, projects that required vision and substantial financial backing. He spoke with the passion of someone who truly loved what he did, describing how he could look at an abandoned warehouse or empty lot and see the potential for something beautiful and profitable. "Most people see problems," he said over our second bottle of wine. "I see opportunities. That's the difference between success and mediocrity in this business." I was completely captivated. Aaron seemed to represent everything I was working toward. In my own career, financial independence, professional respect, the confidence that came from building something significant. When he asked about my consulting business, he listened with genuine interest, asking insightful questions about my strategies and offering suggestions based on his own experience with marketing and client development. Our relationship moved quickly, perhaps too quickly in retrospect. Within 3 months, I was spending most nights at his penthouse apartment overlooking the city. Within 6 months, he was talking about marriage and the life we could build together. Aaron painted a picture of a future that was everything I had dreamed of: a partnership between 2 ambitious professionals, a beautiful home, eventually children, financial security that would allow us to pursue our passions without constantly worrying about money. The proposal came exactly 1 year after our wine-spilling meeting, at the same restaurant where we had shared our first real conversation. Aaron had arranged for a private dining room, complete with candles and roses and a photographer hidden in the corner to capture my surprised reaction. The ring was stunning, a vintage Art Deco setting with a 2-carat diamond that caught the light from every angle. When I said yes, Aaron's smile was so bright and genuine that I felt like the luckiest woman in the world. Our wedding 8 months later was exactly the kind of celebration I had always imagined. Aaron insisted on paying for everything, despite my protests about the expense. The venue was a historic mansion with gardens that looked like something from a fairy tale. My dress was custom designed by a local designer Aaron had discovered, and commissioned specifically for our wedding. 200 guests, including clients, colleagues, and family members, celebrated with us late into the night. Looking back now, I realize there were signs even then that Aaron's financial situation wasn't as stable as he made it appear. The wedding expenses that seemed lavish but manageable to someone in love were actually funded by loans and credit that Aaron had already stretched to their limits. The penthouse apartment that impressed me so much was mortgaged far beyond its value. Even the engagement ring, which I treasured as a symbol of our love, had been purchased with money that didn't really exist. But I didn't see any of that at the time. I saw a successful businessman who was generous with his resources and eager to share his good fortune with the woman he loved. Aaron had a way of making expensive decisions seem practical, of framing financial risks as smart investments. When he suggested that we should buy the house in Westfield Heights just 6 months after our wedding, I trusted his judgment completely. Real estate is the foundation of wealth, he explained, as we toured the 4-bedroom colonial with its updated kitchen and master suite. We're not just buying a house, May. We're making an investment in our future. The monthly mortgage payments were higher than I was comfortable with, but Aaron assured me that his business income could easily cover our expenses. He encouraged me to focus on growing my consulting practice without worrying about our household finances. Let me handle the money side of things, he said. You're brilliant at what you do, and I want you to have the freedom to build something amazing. It seemed like the perfect arrangement. Aaron managed our investments, our insurance, our tax planning, our retirement savings. I focused on my clients and my business, trusting that my husband was building the financial foundation for our life together. When he occasionally brought home loan documents or investment paperwork for me to sign, I barely glanced at them. Aaron explained everything in terms that sounded reasonable and beneficial, and I had no reason to doubt his expertise. Our life fell into a comfortable routine over the next several years. Aaron would leave early for site visits and client meetings, often not returning until late in the evening. I worked from our home office, taking calls with clients and developing marketing strategies for small businesses throughout the region. We hosted dinner parties for Aaron's business associates, took weekend trips to wine country, talked about starting a family once our careers were more established. I thought we were building something solid and lasting together. I thought Aaron's long hours and frequent stress were the natural result of growing a successful business. I thought the occasional tension in our conversations about money was just the normal adjustment period of two independent people learning to share their financial lives. I had no idea that Aaron was systematically destroying our future while pretending to build it. What unsettled me most about Jennifer's behavior wasn't what she was saying. It was how she was saying it. While I sat at my kitchen table feeling like my entire world had collapsed around me, Jennifer moved through my house with the calm efficiency of someone organizing a dinner party, rather than dealing with a financial catastrophe that could destroy my life. She had taken over my kitchen counter completely, spreading the debt collection notices across the granite surface in neat, organized rows. Bank statements were sorted by date in one pile, loan documents in another, legal notices in a third. She worked with the methodical precision of someone who had done this before, occasionally making notes in a leather portfolio she had pulled from her briefcase. "Jennifer, how are you so calm about this?" I asked, watching her photograph each document with her phone. "I'm about to lose everything, and you're acting like you're reviewing quarterly reports." She looked up from a foreclosure. Notice her expression patient but focused. "May, panic doesn't solve problems. Organization and strategy solve problems. Right now, we need to understand exactly what Aaron did and when he did it before we can figure out how to undo it." But it wasn't just her organizational approach that felt wrong. It was the complete absence of surprise or shock at anything. She was reading. When I had first seen the debt collection notices, My hands had shaken so badly I could barely hold the papers. When I learned about the forged signatures and hidden loans, I had felt physically sick. Jennifer, on the other hand, examined each revelation with the detached interest of someone reviewing information she had already suspected. "This loan here," she said, pointing to a document dated 6 months ago. "Aaron used your Social Security number to apply for a $75,000 line of credit against the house. The application shows your signature, but look at the date. You were in Chicago that week for the Morrison client presentation. I know because I drove you to the airport." I stared at the signature that was supposed to be mine. It looked convincing. But Jennifer was right. I had been out of town when this document was allegedly signed. "How do you remember exactly where I was 6 months ago?" "Because I pay attention to details that matter," she replied, already moving on to the next document. "This credit card application was submitted while you were visiting your sister in Portland. This business loan paperwork was filed during your weekend retreat in the mountains with your college friends. Aaron was very systematic about timing these applications when you had solid alibis." The precision of her memory was extraordinary, but also deeply unsettling. Jennifer seemed to have been tracking not just Aaron's suspicious activities, but my whereabouts and schedule with an accuracy that went far beyond normal friendship or business partnership. I tried to remember if I had ever noticed her paying such close attention to my travel plans, but I couldn't recall any obvious signs. "Jennifer, why were you keeping track of my schedule so carefully? That level of detail seems—" I paused, not wanting to sound accusatory but unable to ignore my growing discomfort. "It seems like more than coincidence." She stopped what she was doing and looked at me directly, her expression serious but not defensive. "May, how long have we been business partners?" 3 years. "And in those 3 years, how many times have I been wrong about a potential problem with a client or a contract?" I thought about it. Jennifer had an almost uncanny ability to spot issues before they became serious problems. She had warned me about clients who would be difficult to collect payments from, contracts that had unfavorable terms buried in the fine print, business relationships that would ultimately prove problematic. I had always attributed it to her background in finance and her naturally cautious personality. "You've been right about almost everything," I admitted. "I wasn't just being cautious about Aaron, May. I was being careful because something felt wrong from the beginning. Not wrong enough to prove anything, but wrong enough to make me pay attention." She returned to her document review, but I continued watching her face for any sign of the emotional response I expected from someone discovering that her business partner's husband was a criminal. Jennifer's expression remained focused and analytical, as if she were solving a complex but impersonal puzzle, rather than dealing with a situation that would fundamentally alter the life of someone she claimed to care about. "What felt wrong?" I pressed. "What did you notice that I missed?" Jennifer set down the papers and leaned back in her chair, considering her words carefully. "Aaron asked too many questions about our business finances. Not obvious questions, but subtle inquiries about our client base, our revenue streams, our banking relationships. At first, I thought he was just being a supportive spouse, interested in your success, but the questions became more specific over time." "What kind of specific questions?" "He wanted to know which clients paid the largest invoices, how we structured our contracts, whether we had any major projects that would generate significant cash flow. He also seemed very interested in our business insurance policies and whether we had any assets that could serve as collateral for expansion loans." I felt a chill run down my spine. "You think he was planning to involve our business in his schemes?" "I think Aaron was looking for every possible source of money he could access through you. Our consulting firm would have been the logical next target after he exhausted the equity in your house and your personal credit." The realization hit me like a physical blow. Aaron hadn't just been planning to abandon me with his debts. He had been systematically evaluating every asset and income source in my life to determine how much damage he could inflict before his escape. The business I had built with Jennifer, The clients who trusted us, the professional reputation I had spent years developing. All of it would have been collateral damage in Aaron's financial destruction. Jennifer, if you suspected this, why didn't you confront him directly? Why didn't you demand answers? She smiled then, the same small, knowing smile that had unsettled me earlier. Because confronting Aaron would have forced him to accelerate his timeline. As long as he thought he was operating in secret, I had time to prepare. Prepare for what? To make sure that when Aaron finally showed his true colors, we would be ready to destroy him completely. The certainty in her voice sent another chill through me. Jennifer wasn't just angry about Aaron's betrayal, she was speaking like someone who had been planning a war. The call came at 11:47 p.m., 3 days after Jennifer had taken over my kitchen and my life. I had barely slept since Aaron's abandonment, spending my nights staring at the ceiling and trying to process the magnitude of his betrayal. When my phone buzzed on the nightstand, the name on the screen made my heart skip several beats. Aaron. My hands trembled as I answered. Hello? May. His voice was strained, barely recognizable as the confident, charming man I had married. May, I need you to listen to me very carefully. Something's happened. Something's gone very wrong. I sat up in bed, my pulse racing. After days of silence, after abandoning me with $300,000 in debt and running off with his secretary, Aaron was calling me in the middle of the night, sounding terrified. What are you talking about? What's gone wrong? You're the one who destroyed our life and disappeared. The accounts, he said, his voice cracking. All of them. The offshore accounts, the business holdings, the investment portfolios I moved to the Cayman Islands. They're frozen. Every single one. Someone reported them to the Financial Crimes Division. I didn't understand what he was saying. What offshore accounts? What business holdings? Aaron, I don't know anything about international investments. There was a long pause, and when Aaron spoke again, his voice was barely above a whisper. May, I transferred over $2 million out of the country before I left. Money from the business sales, from the property liquidations, from some other sources. It was supposed to be untouchable. Veronica and I were going to start over here in Miami with enough money to never worry about anything again. The number hit me like a physical blow. $2 million. While I had been sitting in our empty house trying to figure out how to pay for groceries, Aaron had been living in Miami with access to $2 million that he had somehow stolen and hidden offshore. The scope of his betrayal was so much larger than I had even imagined. You stole $2 million? I managed to say. It wasn't stealing, Aaron said quickly, though his tone suggested he didn't believe his own words. It was money from business. Transactions, asset sales, legitimate deals. I just structured things so that the money would be protected from the debt collectors and the bankruptcy proceedings. Protected from the creditors you left me to deal with, I said, anger finally cutting through my shock. Protected while I lose our house and our cars and everything we built together. May, that's not important right now. What's important is that someone accessed my financial records. Someone with sophisticated knowledge of international banking and money laundering laws. Someone who knew exactly which agencies to contact and what evidence to provide. This wasn't a random investigation or a routine audit. Someone deliberately targeted me. Something about his panic triggered a memory. Jennifer's calm confidence, her mysterious knowledge of Aaron's activities, her promise that she had already started fixing our situation. Aaron, when exactly were these accounts frozen? Yesterday morning. The bank called to inform me that all transactions had been suspended pending a federal investigation into suspicious money transfers. May, I'm in serious trouble here. These aren't just civil penalties we're talking about. If they can prove that I used fraudulent documents or moved money illegally, I could be looking at federal charges. I thought about Jennifer sitting in my kitchen, methodically photographing documents and taking notes in her leather portfolio. I thought about her claim that she had been documenting Aaron's activities for months, collecting evidence of forged signatures and illegal asset transfers. "Aaron, who exactly reported you to the Financial Crimes Division?" "I don't know," he said, his voice rising with panic. "The bank won't give me details about who initiated the investigation. But May, whoever did this had access to information that should have been impossible to obtain. Bank records, email communications, security footage from my office, detailed transaction histories going back over a year. This was someone with serious resources and connections." My mind raced. Jennifer had mentioned security camera footage and email communications just days ago. She had claimed to have documentation of Aaron's fraudulent activities, evidence that she had been collecting for months. But the level of access she would have needed to gather that information and then successfully coordinate an international financial investigation was far beyond anything I could have imagined from my business partner. "Aaron, I need to ask you something, and I need you to answer me honestly. Have you ever heard of anyone named Jennifer investigating your business activities?" The silence on the other end of the line stretched for so long that I thought the call had been disconnected. When Aaron finally spoke, his voice was filled with a fear that was deeper than anything I had heard from him yet. "May, how do you know that name?" "Jennifer who?" "Jennifer Walsh, my business partner. The woman I started the consulting firm with 3 years ago. Aaron, you've met her dozens of times. She's been to our house for dinner parties. She was at our wedding." Another long silence, and then Aaron said something that made my blood run cold. "May, I've never met anyone named Jennifer Walsh. I've never heard you mention a business partner by that name. The woman you introduced to me as your business partner was named Amelia Chen. She was quiet, Asian, worked in accounting. I remember her because Veronica didn't like her." The world seemed to tilt sideways. "Aaron, that's impossible. Jennifer and I have been working together for 3 years. You've had conversations with her. She recommended the lawyer who reviewed our business contracts. She helped us plan the expansion strategy for the consulting firm. May, I'm telling you, I have never met a woman named Jennifer Walsh. And if she's been investigating my business activities, if she's the one who reported my accounts to the federal authorities, then you need to understand something very important. You're not dealing with a business partner who is trying to protect you. You're dealing with someone who has been running a long-term operation specifically designed to destroy me." My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the phone. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that whoever Jennifer Walsh really is, she's not your friend. And if she had enough information to freeze $2 million in offshore accounts and trigger a federal investigation, then she's not just some consultant who got suspicious about her business partner's husband. She's a professional, May. And you need to get away from her right now." The line went dead, leaving me sitting alone in my dark bedroom, trying to process the impossible reality that the woman who had been helping me for the past 3 days might not be who she claimed to be at all. Didn't sleep for the rest of the night. Aaron's words echoed in my mind like a broken record. I've never met a woman named Jennifer Walsh. It was impossible. It had to be impossible. Aaron was panicking, confused, maybe even lying to manipulate me into helping him somehow. But as I lay in the darkness, fragments of memories began surfacing that I had never questioned before. Jennifer always met our clients at their offices, never at ours. She handled all the contracts and financial paperwork, always insisting that she preferred to work with the legal details herself. When we attended networking events together, she had a habit of stepping away whenever someone wanted to take group photos. She paid for our office rent and business expenses through her own accounts, claiming it was easier for tax purposes. Most unsettling of all, I realized I had never actually seen Jennifer and Aaron in the same room having a conversation. At our dinner parties, she would arrive early to help me prepare and leave before the evening really got started. At business events where spouses were invited, she always had a last-minute excuse. Even at our wedding, now that I thought about I couldn't remember seeing her during the reception, though I was certain she had been there because I had thanked her for the expensive crystal vase she had given us. When Jennifer arrived at my house the next morning with coffee and pastries, she looked exactly the same as always. Professional, organized, ready to tackle whatever challenges the day might bring. But for the first time in 3 years, I found myself studying her face for signs of deception, looking for clues about who she really was. "You look terrible," she said, setting the coffee down in front of me. "Didn't you sleep?" "Aaron called me last night," I said, watching her reaction carefully. Jennifer's expression didn't change, but I noticed that she paused for just a fraction of a second before opening her laptop. What did he want? "He said someone reported his offshore accounts to the federal authorities. $2 million in hidden assets have been frozen pending a money laundering investigation." Jennifer nodded thoughtfully, as if this was interesting but not surprising news. "That's faster than I expected." The casual way she said it made my stomach clench. "Faster than you expected? Jennifer, what does that mean?" She looked up from her laptop screen, and for the first time since I had known her, Jennifer's expression was completely unguarded. There was no pretense of confusion or concern, no attempt to appear shocked by the revelations about Aaron's criminal activities. Instead, she looked at me with the calm assessment of someone who had been waiting for this conversation. "It means that Aaron's financial crimes were reported to the appropriate authorities with enough evidence to trigger an immediate investigation. It means that the money he stole and tried to hide offshore is now secured and will eventually be returned to the people he defrauded." "Jennifer, how do you know all of this? How do you know about offshore accounts and federal investigations and money laundering procedures?" She closed the laptop and leaned back in her chair, studying my face with an intensity that made me uncomfortable. "May, what do you know about my background? What do you know about my life before we became business partners?" I tried to think. In 3 years of working closely together, building a business, sharing the stress and excitement of entrepreneurship, what had Jennifer actually told me about herself? I realized with growing alarm that I knew almost nothing concrete about her past. "You said you worked in corporate finance before starting the consulting firm. You mentioned that you had experience with small business accounting and legal compliance. What else?" I searched my memory, but there was surprisingly little. "You said you moved here from the East Coast. You mentioned that you prefer to keep your personal life private. And you never found that strange? In 3 years of partnership, you never questioned why I didn't talk about my family, my previous jobs, my education, my relationships. The truth was, I had found it refreshing." Jennifer's professionalism and discretion had been a relief after previous business relationships where personal drama constantly interfered with work. I had respected her boundaries and appreciated that she respected mine. But now, sitting across from someone who might not be who she claimed to be, those boundaries seemed less like personal preference and more like carefully constructed barriers. "Jennifer, I need you to tell me who you really are." She stood up and walked to the window overlooking my backyard, her back to me as she spoke. "My real name is Jennifer Walsh, so that part was never a lie. But I'm not a former corporate finance manager who decided to start a consulting business. I'm a forensic accountant who specializes in financial fraud investigations, and I work for a federal task force that targets white-collar criminals." The words hit me like a physical blow. "You're a federal agent?" "I'm a consultant who works with federal agencies, state authorities, and private clients to investigate complex financial crimes. I've been tracking Aaron Richardson's activities for over 2 years, long before I met you." My mind raced, trying to process this revelation. "You've been investigating my husband for 2 years? Then why? Why did you become my business partner? Why did you get involved in my life?" Jennifer turned back to face me, and I saw something in her expression that might have been regret. Because Aaron's criminal network was larger and more sophisticated than we initially realized. We needed someone with legitimate access to his personal life, someone who could provide insight into his behavior patterns and financial habits. Someone he trusted completely. The full implications of what she was saying began to dawn on me. You used me. Our friendship, our business partnership, everything we built together. It was all just a way to get closer to Aaron. It started that way, Jennifer said quietly. But it became more complicated than that. You were never supposed to be a target of Aaron's schemes. We thought he was keeping his criminal activities separate from his marriage. When we realized that he was planning to destroy your life as part of his exit strategy, the mission parameters changed. What do you mean the mission parameters changed? Jennifer's expression hardened, and I saw a glimpse of the professional investigator behind the friendly business partner facade. I mean that Aaron Richardson crossed a line when he decided to frame you for his crimes and abandon you to face the consequences. At that point, this stopped being just a financial fraud investigation. It became personal. Personal for who? For me, May. Aaron hurt someone I care about, and I don't let that slide. Jennifer moved to her briefcase and pulled out a thick manila folder I had never seen before. When she opened it on my kitchen table, I found myself looking at photographs, bank records, and documents that made Aaron's $300,000 debt seem like pocket change. The scope of what I was seeing was so vast that I couldn't immediately process it. May, Aaron isn't just a real estate developer who got in over his head with gambling debts, Jennifer said, spreading surveillance photos across the table. He's been running a sophisticated money laundering operation for the past 4 years, using his real estate business as a front to clean money for some very dangerous people. The photographs showed Aaron meeting with men I didn't recognize in parking garages, hotel lobbies, and restaurants. In one image, he was handing a briefcase to a man in an expensive suit outside what appeared to be a construction site. In another, he was sitting at a cafe table with 2 men whose faces were partially obscured by shadows, but whose body language suggested they were not casual business associates. Who are these people? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Drug dealers, arms traffickers, human trafficking operations. Aaron's real estate company has been purchasing properties with dirty money, renovating them with inflated budgets that allow for cash kickbacks, and then selling them to create clean investment returns for criminal organizations, Jennifer pointed to a bank statement showing a series of large deposits and withdrawals. This property here in downtown, Aaron purchased it for $800,000 using money from a drug trafficking ring. He spent $1.2 million on renovations, but the actual construction costs were only $400,000. The extra $800,000 went back to the criminal organization as profit sharing from a legitimate real estate investment. I stared at the numbers, trying to understand how the man I had shared a bed with for years could have been involved in something so complex and dangerous. Jennifer, are you saying that our house, our lifestyle, everything we had was built on money from drug dealers and criminals? Not just built on it, May. Aaron's been using your identity, your credit, your legitimate business reputation to make his money laundering operation appear more credible. Banks were more willing to approve loans and financing when Aaron could present himself as a stable married man with a successful wife who had her own consulting business. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. I hadn't just been an unknowing victim of Aaron's financial schemes. I had been an unwitting accomplice, providing legitimacy and credibility that allowed him to clean millions of dollars in criminal proceeds. Jennifer spread out a detailed organizational chart that looked like something from a federal law enforcement briefing. The Chen organization that I mentioned earlier, they're not just running human trafficking operations. They control a network of businesses across 3 states that includes massage parlors, restaurants, import companies, and construction firms. Aaron's real estate company was a crucial part of their money laundering infrastructure. She pointed to photographs of businesses I recognized from around the city. This restaurant where we had lunch last month? It's owned by Chen's organization and used to clean money from their trafficking operations. This construction company that Aaron claimed was his biggest competitor? They're actually partners in a scheme to inflate building costs and generate cash kickbacks for criminal investors. The people Aaron was working with don't just lose money and walk away when an operation falls apart, Jennifer continued. When their money laundering pipeline gets disrupted, when their financial assets get frozen, they look for someone to blame, and they look for ways to recover their losses. What are you saying? Jennifer pulled out another set of photographs, these showing the exterior of my house from various angles, clearly taken with telephoto lenses from different positions around the neighborhood. Aaron's disappearance wasn't just about escaping debt, May. It was about escaping the people he had been working with. And now that his operation has been exposed and their money has been seized, they're looking for alternative sources of recovery. My blood ran cold as I understood what she was implying. They're coming after me. The house Aaron bought with your signature is worth $600,000. The cars registered in your name, the business assets of your consulting firm, your personal bank. Accounts, from their perspective, these represent partial compensation for the millions of dollars they've lost because of Aaron's exposure. I felt like I was drowning. But I didn't know. I never knew about any of this. I was just trying to build a life with my husband. That won't matter to them, May. These aren't people who care about legal technicalities or innocent spouses. They see assets that were purchased with their money, and they want those assets back. Jennifer showed me a series of phone records. Aaron received 17 calls yesterday from numbers traced to known criminal associates. The calls started an hour after his offshore accounts were frozen. They know he's in Miami, they know about Veronica, and they know that he doesn't have access to their money anymore, so they'll go after him, not me. They'll go after both of you, Aaron for stealing their money and you for benefiting from their investments. In their world, married couples are considered a single financial entity. Jennifer pulled out what appeared to be intercepted text messages and email communications. We've been monitoring communications between several criminal organizations over the past 48 hours. There are active discussions about asset recovery, alternative collection methods, and what they're calling collateral liquidation. What does collateral liquidation mean? It means they're planning to seize everything you own, liquidate it for cash, and use the proceeds to partially compensate themselves for the money Aaron stole. Your house, your cars, your business equipment, your personal belongings. Everything would be sold to recover as much money as possible. The kitchen felt like it was closing in around me. In the span of a week, I had gone from thinking I was the victim of a cheating husband's financial irresponsibility to discovering that I was caught in the middle of a criminal conspiracy involving millions of dollars and people who apparently had no qualms about using violence to recover their losses. Jennifer, what am I supposed to do? How do I protect myself from people like this? She gathered the photographs and documents back into the folder, her expression grim but determined. We make sure they never get the chance to come after you. We make sure that by the time they figure out how to respond to Aaron's betrayal, there's nothing left for them to recover. What do you mean? I mean, we take everything, May. Every asset, every account, every piece of property that Aaron thought he could hide or protect. We expose his entire network, freeze every dollar he has access to, and make sure that when his criminal associates come looking for compensation, Aaron Richardson has absolutely nothing left to give them. Jennifer's phone buzzed with what appeared to be an urgent message. She read it quickly, her expression growing even more serious. May, we're running out of time faster than I anticipated. Intelligence suggests that Chen's organization is planning to make direct contact with you within the next 72 hours. Direct contact? What kind of direct contact? The kind that involves making demands and threatening consequences if those demands aren't met. They're not going to send lawyers or debt collectors, May. They're going to send people who specialize in persuasion through intimidation. I felt my hands start to shake again. How is this possible? How did my life become a crime thriller? Because Aaron Richardson chose to build his criminal empire using your identity as collateral, and now that empire is collapsing. But here's what Aaron didn't anticipate. He left behind enough evidence for us to take everything he thought he had secured, and we're going to use that evidence to make sure his criminal associates understand that pursuing you would be a very expensive mistake. How do we do that? Jennifer stood up and began packing her materials with the efficiency of someone preparing for a complex operation. We make them an offer they can't refuse, May. We give them Aaron's head on a platter, along with complete documentation of his crimes and evidence that will help them recover at least some of their losses through legitimate legal channels. In exchange, they leave you alone permanently. And if they refuse the offer, then we make sure they understand that going after you means going to war with federal law enforcement agencies that now have enough evidence to destroy their entire criminal network. As Jennifer prepared to leave, I realized that the next phase of this nightmare was about to begin, and that everything I thought I understood about my situation was about to change again. I sat in my empty living room at 3 a.m, surrounded by the remnants of a life that had never been real. Jennifer had left hours earlier, taking her files and photographs with her, but the images were burned into my memory. Aaron passing briefcases to strangers, bank records showing millions of dollars moving through accounts I had never heard of. Surveillance photos of our house taken by people whose faces I couldn't see. The worst part wasn't the money or even the danger. It was the complete dissolution of everything I had believed about myself. For 3 years, I had thought I was a successful small business owner, building a consulting firm with a trusted partner. For 5 years before that, I had thought I was a loving wife, supporting her husband's legitimate real estate business. But Jennifer's revelations had stripped away every layer of that identity, leaving me staring at the truth. I had been a pawn in someone else's game from the very beginning. I picked up the wedding photo from the mantelpiece, the one where Aaron and I were cutting the cake while our guests applauded around us. We looked so happy, so genuinely in love. But now I couldn't look at Aaron's smile without wondering what he had been thinking in that moment. Had he already been planning to use me as cover for his criminal activities? Had he married me because he loved me? Or because a wife with a clean record and legitimate business would make his money laundering operation more credible? The questions were eating me alive because I realized I would probably never know the answers. The man in the photograph, the man I had fallen in love with and trusted with my future, might never have existed at all. Every conversation we had shared about our dreams and goals, every intimate moment where he had talked about building a life together, every time he had told me he loved me, all of it was now suspect. I thought about the early days of our relationship, when Aaron had seemed so interested in my business plans and financial situation. I had been flattered by his attention, impressed that such a successful man would take my small consulting firm seriously. Now I understood that his questions hadn't been about supporting my dreams. They had been about evaluating my usefulness as a legitimate front for his criminal activities. The house felt enormous and threatening around me. Every piece of furniture, every appliance, every decoration had been purchased with money that came from sources I couldn't even fully comprehend. I was sitting in a living room that had been bought with proceeds from drug trafficking, eating off dishes that had been paid for with money from human trafficking operations. The thought made me physically sick. I walked through each room, trying to remember when we had purchased different items, wondering which ones had been bought with legitimate money and which ones were tainted by criminal proceeds. The expensive coffee machine that Aaron had insisted we needed, had that been purchased with money from drug dealers? The artwork on our walls, the custom furniture, the designer clothes in my closet, how much of our lifestyle had been funded by the suffering of other people? But underneath the nausea and betrayal was something else. Rage. Pure, burning fury at Aaron for what he had done to me, at myself for being so trusting and naive, and at the entire situation that had turned my life into a lie. I had worked so hard to build something legitimate and honest, only to discover that I had been used as camouflage for activities that destroyed other people's lives. The anger was almost a relief after days of feeling helpless and confused. For the first time since Jennifer had revealed Aaron's true nature, I felt something other than victimhood. I felt like someone who had been wronged and who had the right to fight back. I started making a list of everything I could remember about Aaron's business activities, every conversation that had seemed odd at the time, but that I had dismissed. The late-night phone calls he claimed were from clients in different time zones. The business trips that seemed to involve more cash transactions than typical real estate deals. The way he always insisted on handling our taxes and financial planning personally, never letting me see the complete picture of our assets and liabilities. There had been signs, I realized. Subtle indicators that something wasn't quite right about Aaron's business operations. But I had been so focused on building my own career, so trusting of the man I loved, that I had ignored my instincts and accepted his explanations without question. I remembered a conversation from 6 months ago when Aaron had come home late, from what he claimed was a client dinner. He had seemed agitated, distracted, and when I asked about his evening, he had given me vague answers about difficult negotiations and demanding investors. At the time, I had attributed his mood to work stress. Now I wondered if he had been meeting with criminal associates, discussing money laundering transactions that were putting our entire life at risk. The realization that I had been complicit in my own deception was almost harder to bear than Aaron's betrayal. I was supposed to be an intelligent, independent woman who could recognize when something was wrong. But I had been so blinded by love and trust that I had handed over control of my financial life to someone who was systematically destroying it. I thought about all the dinner parties we had hosted, all the business associates Aaron had introduced, me too, all the conversations where I had played the role of the supportive wife, discussing our shared dreams and goals. How many of those people had been criminals? How many of those conversations had been about illegal activities that I was too naive to recognize? The photographs Jennifer had shown me flashed through my mind, Aaron shaking hands with human traffickers, exchanging briefcases with drug dealers, conducting business in parking garages and hotel lobbies like something from a crime movie. The man in those photographs was a stranger to me, someone I had never seen before despite sharing a home with him for years. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through old text messages from Aaron, looking for clues I might have missed. Working late again tonight, important client meeting. Have to travel to San Diego for a few days. Big project opportunity. Sorry dinner will be cold, complicated negotiations. How many of those messages had been lies? How many of those absences had been criminal meetings rather than legitimate business? As the sun began to rise outside my kitchen window, I made a decision that felt like stepping off a cliff into unknown territory. I wasn't going to be a victim anymore. I wasn't going to sit in this house waiting for criminal organizations to come after me for crimes I didn't commit. I wasn't going to let Aaron disappear into his new life in Miami while leaving me to face the consequences of his choices. Jennifer had offered to help me take everything Aaron had hidden, to expose his criminal network and protect me from the people he had been working with. At the time, I had been too overwhelmed to fully understand what she was proposing. But now, sitting in the ruins of my former life, I understood that revenge wasn't just an option. It was survival. Aaron had declared war on my future when he decided to use me as collateral damage in his criminal escape plan. Now it was time to fight back with everything I had. He had taught me that trust was a luxury I could no longer afford, that the people closest to us could be the most dangerous enemies, and that sometimes the only way to protect yourself was to destroy the people who threatened you. I wasn't the naive, trusting woman Aaron had married. That woman was gone, replaced by someone who understood that in a world where people could smile at you while planning your destruction, the only safe response was to strike first and strike decisively. Aaron Richardson was about to learn that abandoning his wife had been the biggest mistake of his criminal career. By 7 a.m., I had made my decision. When Jennifer arrived with coffee and her ever-present briefcase, I was waiting for her at the kitchen table with a yellow legal pad covered in notes and questions. "I want to see everything," I said before she could even sit down. "Every file, every photograph, every piece of evidence you've collected about Aaron's activities, and I want to understand exactly how we're going to destroy him." Jennifer studied my face for a moment, and I saw what might have been approval in her expression. "Are you sure you're ready for this, May? Once you see the full scope of what Aaron was involved in, there's no going back to thinking of him as just a cheating husband who made some bad financial decisions. I'm already past that point. Show me." Jennifer opened her briefcase and began pulling out files that were far more extensive than anything she had shown me before. Surveillance photographs dating back over 2 years, bank records from dozens of accounts I had never heard of, email communications between Aaron and people whose names meant nothing to me, but whose business relationships were clearly documented in meticulous detail. "This is Marcus Chen," Jennifer said, pointing to a photograph of Aaron shaking hands with an Asian man in an expensive suit. "He runs a human trafficking operation that brings women from Southeast Asia to work in massage parlors and underground brothels." Aaron laundered approximately $800,000 for Chen's organization over the past 18 months. I stared at the photograph, trying to reconcile the image of my husband conducting business with someone involved in human trafficking. How much money are we talking about in total? Aaron processed approximately $4.2 million through his real estate operations over the past 4 years. His personal profit from these transactions was around $850,000, which explains how he could afford the lifestyle you were living while his legitimate real estate business was actually operating at a loss. Jennifer showed me financial records that painted a picture of systematic deception that was breathtaking in its complexity. Aaron's real estate company had been losing money for years, bleeding cash on failed developments and overextended loans. But the money laundering operations had generated enough profit to not only cover those losses, but to fund the expensive lifestyle that I had thought was evidence of his business success. The penthouse apartment, the luxury cars, the elaborate wedding, the expensive vacations, all of it was paid for with money from criminal organizations, Jennifer explained. Aaron was essentially living on borrowed time, using criminal proceeds to maintain an illusion of success, while his legitimate business collapsed around him. But the most shocking revelation came when Jennifer showed me documents related to our house purchase. May, the down payment for this house came directly from a money laundering transaction involving a drug trafficking operation out of Mexico. Aaron used $150,000 in dirty money to secure the mortgage, then had you sign the loan documents that made you legally responsible for the debt. The implications hit me like a physical blow. So when Aaron abandoned me with the mortgage payments, he was essentially forcing me to pay back money that originally came from drug dealers? Worse than that, the criminal organizations Aaron was working with consider this house to be purchased with their money. From their perspective, they have a legitimate claim to this property as compensation for the money Aaron embezzled when his operation was exposed. Jennifer pulled out a new set of documents that made my hands shake as I read them. Property records, showing that Aaron had been systematically transferring ownership of various assets into shell companies and offshore entities for the past 6 months. Business licenses for companies I had never heard of, all registered under variations of my name and social security number. Aaron didn't just steal money and run away, May. He spent months preparing for his escape by creating a network of fake companies and hidden assets that would make it nearly impossible for law enforcement to recover the stolen funds. And he used your identity to establish many of these entities. What does that mean for me legally? It means that on paper, you appear to be a knowing participant in a multi-million-dollar money laundering scheme. Aaron created documentation that suggests you are aware of and involved in his criminal activities. If federal prosecutors wanted to build a case against you as a co-conspirator, they would have enough evidence to make your life very difficult. I felt the walls closing in around me. But you're a federal investigator. You know I wasn't involved. You can protect me from prosecution." Jennifer's expression grew serious. "I can testify that you were an unwitting victim rather than a willing participant. But the legal system moves slowly, and while your case works its way through the courts, your life would be destroyed. Your assets would be frozen. Your business would collapse. Your reputation would be ruined. Even if you were eventually cleared of criminal charges, you would lose everything. So what do we do?" Jennifer spread out detailed floor plans and security assessments for multiple locations across the city. "We conduct our own investigation, May. We find every asset Aaron thought he had hidden, document every transaction he made using your forged signatures, and we gather enough evidence to prove that you were a victim rather than a participant." She pointed to photographs of office buildings, storage facilities, and bank branches. "Aaron established accounts and safe deposit boxes at 7 different locations using your identity. He has computers and hard drives stored in private facilities that contain records of every transaction he ever made. Most importantly, he kept detailed records of his communications with the criminal organizations he was working with." Why would he keep records of criminal activities? Insurance. Aaron knew that if his criminal associates ever decided to eliminate him, the only thing protecting him would be evidence that could implicate them in federal crimes. He documented everything, as leverage to ensure his own safety. Jennifer pulled out a tablet showing surveillance footage from various locations. "We know where Aaron stored the evidence, we know how to access the accounts he established using your identity, and we know how to recover the assets he thought he had hidden offshore." "Jennifer, what you're describing sounds like breaking and entering, identity theft, and bank fraud. What I'm describing is recovering property that legally belongs to you from accounts that were fraudulently established using your identity. Aaron forged your signatures to create these accounts and storage arrangements. As the victim of identity theft, you have every right to reclaim what was stolen." She showed me copies of the forged documents Aaron had used to establish his hidden accounts. My signatures on loan applications I had never seen, business licenses for companies I had never authorized, property deeds transferring ownership to shell corporations I had never heard of. "This is our window of opportunity, May. Aaron's criminal associates don't yet know where all the assets are hidden. Law enforcement doesn't yet have enough evidence to seize the offshore accounts. We have maybe 72 hours to recover everything. Aaron stole before other people figure out how to access it themselves. What happens to the money once we recover it? Legally, recovered assets from criminal activities are typically held as evidence during prosecution and then distributed to victims of the crimes. As the primary victim of Aaron's identity theft and financial fraud, you would have the strongest claim to compensation from any recovered funds." I looked at the surveillance photos, floor plans, and account information spread across my kitchen table. The scope of Aaron's deception was staggering, but so was the opportunity to recover everything he had stolen and ensure that he faced consequences for every crime he had committed. "How do we start?" Jennifer smiled, and I saw the same determination that had carried her through months of unauthorized investigation. "We start by taking back everything Aaron thought he could steal from you, May. And we make sure that when this is over, he has absolutely nothing left." The threat materialized sooner than Jennifer had predicted. At 2:15 p.m. on Thursday, while we were going through Aaron's hidden business records in my home office, my doorbell rang. Through the front window, I could see 2 men in dark suits standing on my porch, their posture suggesting they weren't here for a friendly conversation. "Don't answer it," Jennifer said immediately, moving to the window to get a better look at our visitors. "Those aren't federal agents or debt collectors." The men were both tall and well-dressed, but there was something about the way they stood and moved that suggested they were accustomed to getting what they wanted through intimidation, rather than legal processes. One of them was speaking quietly into a cell phone while the other examined the exterior of my house with the methodical attention of someone planning a return visit. "Who are they?" I whispered, though I was already afraid I knew the answer. "Representatives of Aaron's former business partners. They're here to assess what assets might be available for recovery. Jennifer pulled out her own phone and began taking photographs of the men through the window. The tall one on the left is Casper Molina. He works for the Chen organization I showed you earlier. The other one is Jason Voss. He's muscle for a drug trafficking ring that Aaron laundered money for last year. My blood ran cold. These weren't lawyers or investigators. These were the actual criminals that Aaron had been working with. And they were standing on my front porch evaluating my home like it was merchandise they intended to collect. The doorbell rang again, followed by a firm knock that suggested they weren't planning to leave without some kind of response. Jennifer grabbed my arm and pulled me away from the window. "We're going out the back door right now," she said, already moving toward the kitchen. "These people don't make social calls, and they're not here to negotiate payment plans." "But this is my house," I protested, even as I followed her toward the rear of the building. "I can't just run away from my own home." "May, these are the people who traffic human beings and distribute drugs for a living. Your legal ownership of this house means nothing to them. If they think this property represents partial compensation for the money Aaron stole, they will take it by whatever means necessary." We slipped out through the back door and made our way to Jennifer's car, which was parked in the alley behind my house. As we drove away, I could see the two men walking around the perimeter of my property, taking photographs and making notes. One of them was trying the handle on my back gate. "Where are we going?" I asked, my hands shaking as the reality of the situation sank in. "Jennifer, I can't just abandon everything I own. My clothes, my personal belongings, my business records. Everything I need is in that house. We're going to a safe location where we can work without interruption," Jennifer replied, her voice calm despite the circumstances. "And May, you need to understand that your personal belongings are the least of your concerns right now. Those men weren't just looking at your house. They were evaluating how difficult it would be to take possession of it." She drove us to a nondescript office building downtown, using a keycard to access an underground parking garage. The elevator required another keycard to reach the 8th floor, where Jennifer led me through a series of security doors to an office that looked more like a command center than a typical workplace. Multiple computer screens displayed financial data, surveillance footage, and what appeared to be real-time tracking information. The walls were covered with photographs, maps, and organizational charts that detailed criminal networks across multiple states. This wasn't just an investigation into Aaron's activities. This was the headquarters for a major law enforcement operation. "Jennifer, what is this place?" "Regional headquarters for the Financial Crimes Task Force. This is where we coordinate investigations into money laundering operations, organized crime financial networks, and white-collar criminal conspiracies." She gestured to a conference room where several other people were working at computers and examining documents. "Aaron's case is part of a much larger investigation into criminal money laundering on the West Coast." A man in his 50s approached us, his expression serious but professional. "Jennifer, I assume this is Mrs. Richardson? We need to brief her on the current threat assessment." "May, this is Agent Evans, my supervisor." "Agent Evans, May Richardson has agreed to cooperate fully with our investigation into her husband's criminal activities." Agent Evans led us to a conference table where files and photographs were already laid out. "Mrs. Richardson, we've been monitoring communications between several criminal organizations that were using your husband's services. As of this morning, there are active discussions about recovering assets through what they're calling alternative collection methods." "What does that mean?" I asked, though I was afraid I already knew. "It means they've identified you as a target for kidnapping, extortion, or direct seizure of property. These organizations have lost millions of dollars because of your husband's exposure, and they view you as a legitimate source of compensation." The room seemed to spin around me. How is that possible? I didn't even know about Aaron's criminal activities. "That's irrelevant to them, Mrs. Richardson. You benefited from the proceeds of their money laundering operations. You're legally connected to the assets they consider theirs, and you're significantly more accessible than your husband, who is currently protected by geographic distance and federal surveillance in Miami. Agent Evans pulled out a series of surveillance photographs showing my house, my car, and what appeared to be images of me leaving my office building. They've been watching you for the past 48 hours, documenting your routines and identifying opportunities for contact. We intercepted communications this morning suggesting that they plan to approach you directly within the next 24 hours. Approach me how? Kidnapping, most likely. They'll demand that you sign over property, deeds, provide access to bank accounts, or arrange for asset transfers as ransom for your release. I felt like I was drowning in a nightmare that kept getting worse. What am I supposed to do? How do I protect myself from people like this? Jennifer leaned forward, her expression determined. We make sure they have nothing to gain by coming. After you, May, we expose their entire operation, freeze all the remaining assets they're hoping to recover, and make it clear that targeting you will only bring more law enforcement attention to their activities. How do we do that? By finishing what we started. By taking everything Aaron has left and making sure these criminal organizations understand that their money is gone forever. Agent Evans spread out a detailed plan across the conference table that looked like something from a military operation. Maps, photographs, and timelines covered every surface, showing locations across 3 states where Aaron had hidden assets and conducted business with his criminal associates. We need to move tonight, Evans explained. Our intelligence suggests that the criminal organizations will attempt to make contact with you tomorrow morning. Once that happens, your safety becomes our primary concern, which limits our ability to pursue Aaron's hidden assets. I stared at the complexity of what they were proposing. What exactly are you asking me to do? Jennifer pointed to a series of photographs showing office buildings, storage facilities, and what appeared to be construction sites. Aaron established shell companies and offshore accounts using your identity and forged signatures. Legally, you have ownership rights to these entities, which means you can access the assets before law enforcement seizure procedures are completed. You want me to steal Aaron's money? We want you to reclaim money that was stolen using your identity, Agent Evans corrected. According to the documentation Aaron created, you're already the legal owner of these assets. We're just asking you to exercise those ownership rights before Aaron's criminal associates realize what's happening. The plan was ambitious and dangerous. I would need to visit 4 different locations across the city, accessing safe deposit boxes, storage units, and business accounts that Aaron had established using my forged signatures. Jennifer and her team would provide surveillance and backup, but I would need to physically present myself as the legitimate account holder to gain access to the hidden assets. What if Aaron changed the access codes or moved the money? I asked. What if his criminal associates are already watching these locations? That's a risk we have to take, Jennifer replied. But Aaron's communications suggest that he believed these assets were completely secure. He was planning to access them himself once the initial investigation died down. Agent Evans handed me a thick folder containing account numbers, access codes, and forged identification documents that would allow me to pose as an authorized representative of Aaron's shell companies. Mrs. Richardson, I need you to understand that what we're asking you to do exists in a legal gray area. You're using fraudulent documents to access accounts that were established through identity theft, even though the identity that was stolen was your own. What are the legal risks for me? If everything goes according to plan, you'll be protected as a cooperating witness in a federal investigation. If something goes wrong, if you're arrested or if Aaron's associates identify you during these operations, the legal protections become much more complicated. I looked at the photographs and documents spread across the table, trying to process the magnitude of what they were asking me to do. 6 months ago, I had been a small business owner worried about quarterly tax payments and client retention. Now I was being asked to conduct what amounted to a coordinated heist against my own husband's criminal network. How much money are we talking about? Jennifer consulted a spreadsheet on her laptop. Conservative estimates suggest that Aaron has approximately $1.3 million in accessible assets across these various accounts and storage facilities. The actual amount could be significantly higher if he's been more successful at hiding money than our investigation has uncovered. The number was staggering. While I had been sitting in my empty house trying to figure out how to pay for groceries, Aaron had been living in Miami with access to over $1 million in hidden assets. And if we recover this money, what happens to it? Legally, the money will need to be held as evidence while the criminal cases are resolved, Agent Evans explained. But as the victim of identity theft and financial fraud, you would have a legitimate claim to compensation for the damages you've suffered. I stood up and walked to the window overlooking the city. Somewhere out there, Aaron was living comfortably in Miami with his secretary, probably congratulating himself on his successful escape. Meanwhile, I was hiding in a federal task force headquarters, planning to raid the very assets he thought he had secured for his new life. The irony wasn't lost on me. Aaron had spent months planning his elaborate escape, creating shell companies and hiding money in preparation for abandoning me with his debts. But his own criminal activities had attracted the attention of federal investigators who were now asking me to help them dismantle everything he had built. "I'll do it," I said, turning back to face Jennifer and Agent Evans. "But I want to understand exactly what happens to Aaron when this is over." Jennifer smiled, and I saw the same cold determination that had unsettled me when she first revealed her true identity. "Aaron Richardson's criminal career ends tonight, May. When we're finished, he'll have no money, no assets, no criminal contacts willing to work with him, and a federal indictment that will follow him wherever he tries to run." "What about Veronica?" "Veronica. Hayes has been receiving and spending money that she knew came from criminal activities. She's going to discover very quickly that being Aaron's girlfriend makes her an accessory to money laundering and conspiracy charges." Agent Evans began gathering the documents and photographs. "Mrs. Richardson, we need to move within the next 2 hours. Are you prepared to do this?" I thought about the men who had been standing on my front porch, evaluating my house like it was property they intended to steal. I thought about the months of lies and deception, the forged signatures and hidden debts, the complete destruction of everything I had thought was real about my life. "I'm ready," I said. "Let's take everything." He has. The first location was a high-end storage facility in the financial district, the kind of place where wealthy people kept valuable items they didn't want in their homes. Jennifer had coached me on how to act. Confident but not nervous, businesslike, but not suspicious. I approached the front desk with Aaron's forged documents, my heart pounding so hard I was certain the security guard could hear it. "I need to access Unit 247, I said, handing over the identification that showed me as the authorized representative of Richardson Holdings, LLC. "I believe the account is current." The guard checked his computer and nodded. "Yes, ma'am. The unit was paid through the end of the year. I'll need to see your access code." I provided the numbers Jennifer had given me, and within minutes I was standing in front of a storage unit that contained 3 large safety deposit boxes and what appeared to be several computers and hard drives. Inside the first box, I found nearly $200,000 in cash, bundled in neat stacks and labeled with dates and transaction codes. But it was the contents of the second box that made me realize the true scope of what Aaron had been doing. Photographs of high-ranking government officials at private meetings with known criminals. Audio recordings of conversations that clearly involved bribery and corruption. Documents that suggested Aaron's money laundering operation was just one, part of a much larger criminal network that included elected officials, law enforcement personnel, and federal judges. I was photographing everything with the camera Jennifer had given me when my phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "Stop what you're doing and walk away, or your business partner dies tonight." My hand started shaking as I read the message. They knew where I was. They knew what I was doing. And they had Jennifer. I called the number immediately, my voice trembling as someone answered on the first ring. Who is this? Where is Jennifer? Mrs. Richardson, you need to listen very carefully. The voice was calm and professional, with a slight accent I couldn't identify. Your federal agent friend is currently in our custody. She's unharmed, but her continued safety depends on your immediate cooperation. What do you want? We want you to stop interfering with business that doesn't concern you. We want you to return all documents and recordings you've taken from that storage facility. And we want you to provide us with the access codes for the remaining locations where your husband stored our money. I was trapped in a storage unit with evidence of massive government corruption, while criminals held the federal agent who had been trying to protect me. The situation had escalated far beyond anything I could have imagined. How do I know Jennifer is alive? You don't. But you'll know she's dead if you don't follow our instructions exactly. You have 30 minutes to return to your house. Come. Alone, bring everything you've taken, and be prepared to provide us with complete access to your husband's hidden assets. The line went dead, leaving me alone with the most damaging evidence I had ever seen. But as I stood there trying to decide what to do, I heard a sound that made my blood run cold. Footsteps in the hallway outside the storage unit. Someone was coming, and I was trapped with nowhere to run. I quickly stuffed the cash and documents into the bag Jennifer had given me and moved toward the back of the storage unit, hoping to find some way to avoid whoever was approaching. But when the footsteps stopped directly outside my unit, I realized that hiding was pointless. May? Jennifer's voice called softly from the hallway. May, are you in there? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Jennifer, how did you get here? They said they had kidnapped you. Jennifer appeared in the doorway of the storage unit, and for the first time since I had known her, she looked genuinely surprised. Who said they kidnapped me? I've been monitoring your progress from the surveillance van. What are you talking about? I showed her the text message on my phone, and Jennifer's expression immediately shifted from confusion to alarm. May, I didn't send this message, and more importantly, no one in our operation would have told you to return to your house. That location has been compromised since yesterday. Then who sent this? Who knew I was here? Jennifer studied the message more carefully, her expression growing darker. This came from someone with access to real-time surveillance of your activities. Someone who knew exactly where you were and what you were doing at the precise moment. You received the message. Aaron? No. This is much more sophisticated than anything Aaron could coordinate from Miami. This is someone with professional surveillance capabilities and the resources to coordinate a complex deception operation. Jennifer pulled out her own phone and made a call that connected immediately. Evans, we have a problem. Someone intercepted our operation and attempted to redirect Mrs. Richardson using false threat communications. No, I'm fine. I was never. In danger? Yes, we need immediate backup at the storage facility. She hung up and turned to me with an expression I had never seen before. Genuine fear. May, we're not just dealing with Aaron's criminal associates anymore. Someone with significant resources and professional capabilities has been monitoring our entire investigation. What does that mean? It means we're not the only ones who want Aaron's assets, and whoever else is involved has the capability to intercept federal communications and coordinate sophisticated deception operations. Who would have that kind of capability? Jennifer was already moving toward the exit, grabbing the bag of evidence as she went. Someone who's been planning this operation a lot longer than we have, May. Someone who's been waiting for us to do exactly what we just did. As we left the storage facility, I realized that everything I thought I understood about Aaron's betrayal, Jennifer's investigation, and my own role in this mess was about to change again. We weren't just stealing from Aaron. We were walking into a trap that someone had been setting for months. The backup that Agent Evans promised never arrived. Instead, as Jennifer and I sat in her surveillance van outside the storage facility, her radio crackled with a message that changed everything. All units, Agent Walsh has been compromised. Repeat. Agent Walsh is no longer operating under federal authority. Jennifer's face went pale as she reached for the radio, but before she could respond, it crackled again with a voice I didn't recognize. Mrs. Richardson, Agent Walsh is not who she claims to be. You are in immediate danger. I stared at Jennifer, whose calm, professional demeanor was finally cracking. What is going on? Who is sending these messages? Jennifer set down the radio and turned to face me, and for the first time since I had known her, she looked genuinely vulnerable. May, there's something I haven't told you about why I was really investigating Aaron. What do you mean? The Financial Crimes Task Force never assigned me to investigate Aaron Richardson. I've been tracking him for personal reasons, using federal resources I wasn't authorized to access. The words hit me like a physical blow. Personal reasons? What personal reasons? Jennifer pulled out a photograph from her wallet that showed a young woman who looked remarkably similar to her. This is my sister Amelia. She was one of the women trafficked by Marcus Chen's organization, the same organization that Aaron was laundering money for. I stared at the photograph, trying to process what Jennifer was telling me. Your sister was trafficked? When? What happened to her? Amelia disappeared 3 years ago. She was working as a translator for an import business that was actually a front for Chen's trafficking operation. When she figured out what was really happening and tried to leave, they killed her to prevent her from talking to authorities. Jennifer, I'm so sorry. But what does this have to do with Aaron? Aaron's money laundering operation provided the financial infrastructure that allowed Chen's organization to expand their trafficking business. The real estate transactions Aaron processed included properties that were used as safe houses and brothels. Your husband helped create the system that killed my sister. The revelation recontextualized everything that had happened over the past week. Jennifer's calm confidence, her extensive knowledge of Aaron's activities, her determination to destroy him completely. It wasn't professional dedication to law enforcement. It was personal revenge. So when you became my business partner, when you built a relationship with me, it was all about getting closer to Aaron so you could destroy him? It started that way, Jennifer admitted. But it became more complicated when I realized that Aaron was planning to destroy your life as part of his escape plan. You didn't deserve to be collateral damage in his criminal activities. But you're not really a federal agent. I am a forensic accountant, and I do work with federal agencies on contract. But the investigation into Aaron was never officially authorized. I've been using my legitimate access to federal databases and surveillance resources to conduct an unauthorized operation. The radio crackled again with the unfamiliar voice. Mrs. Richardson, Agent Walsh has been using you to conduct an illegal investigation. Her actions have compromised multiple ongoing federal operations. Jennifer grabbed the radio angrily. Who is this? Identify yourself. This is Agent Casper Morrison, FBI Financial Crimes Division. Agent Walsh, you are ordered to surrender immediately and release Mrs. Richardson from participation in your unauthorized activities. I felt like the ground was shifting beneath me. Again. Jennifer, are you telling me that everything we've done tonight was illegal? That you don't have the authority to recover Aaron's assets? The assets are real, May. Aaron's crimes are real. The evidence we've collected is legitimate. But the methods I've used to gather that evidence and the recovery operation we conducted tonight were not authorized by federal agencies. What does that mean for me legally? Before Jennifer could answer, the van was surrounded by black SUVs with flashing lights. Federal agents in tactical gear were approaching from all directions, weapons drawn but not pointed directly at us. May, I need you to listen to me very carefully, Jennifer said quickly. Everything I told you about Aaron's criminal activities was true. The evidence we collected tonight is real and will be used to prosecute him. But I need you to tell these agents that you were cooperating with what you believed was a legitimate federal investigation. But I was cooperating with a legitimate federal investigation, wasn't I? Not exactly. But you didn't know that. which means you're protected as an unknowing participant in an unauthorized operation. The van door opened, and Agent Morrison approached, with several other agents. He was tall and authoritative, with the bearing of someone accustomed to taking control of complicated situations. "Mrs. Richardson, I'm Agent Morrison. You're not under arrest, but we need to debrief you about Agent Walsh's unauthorized activities and your involvement in tonight's operations. Am I in legal trouble? That depends on what you knew about Agent Walsh's actual authority and when you knew it. If you believed you were cooperating with a legitimate federal investigation, you should be protected from criminal liability." Jennifer was already being escorted to one of the SUVs, but she called back to me. "May, the evidence we collected tonight will still destroy Aaron. He's still going to lose everything, and the criminal organizations he was working with are still going to be exposed. That part hasn't changed." As I was led to another vehicle for questioning, I realized that even Jennifer's revenge operation had been more complex than I understood. Aaron was indeed going to lose everything, but not through the official federal investigation I thought I was participating in. He was going to be destroyed by the sister of one of his victims, using me as an unwitting accomplice in an elaborate personal vendetta. And somehow that felt like exactly the justice Aaron Richardson deserved. 6 months later, I sat in the penthouse, apartment that had once belonged to Aaron, looking out over the city skyline as I reviewed the final documents that would transfer his last remaining assets into my name. The irony wasn't lost on me. The same apartment where Aaron had planned his escape with Veronica was now my home, purchased with the proceeds from the criminal activities that had destroyed both their lives. Agent Morrison had been true to his word about protecting me from criminal liability. The federal investigation had concluded that I was an unwitting victim of both Aaron's financial crimes and Jennifer's unauthorized revenge operation. But the evidence Jennifer had collected during her illegal investigation had provided prosecutors with everything they needed to build an airtight case against Aaron and his criminal associates. Aaron was currently serving an 8-year federal sentence for money laundering, conspiracy, and identity theft. The romantic escape to Miami had lasted exactly 6 weeks before federal agents arrested him and Veronica at their beachfront hotel. Veronica was serving her own 3-year sentence for conspiracy and money laundering, her dreams of a wealthy new life replaced by the reality of a federal prison cell. The criminal organizations Aaron had been working with were systematically dismantled through coordinated federal and state investigations. Marcus Chen, the human trafficking kingpin whose organization had killed Jennifer's sister, was sentenced to life in prison without parole. The other criminals Aaron had laundered money for received sentences ranging from 15 to 25 years. But perhaps the most satisfying outcome was the financial devastation Aaron faced, even after his criminal sentence was complete. Every asset he had tried to hide, every offshore account he thought was secure, every shell company he had created using my forged signatures, all of it had been seized and transferred to me as compensation for the identity theft and financial fraud he had committed. The house in Westfield Heights that he had mortgaged to fund his criminal activities was now mine, free and clear. The luxury cars he had purchased with dirty money were sold, with the proceeds used to pay off the last of the legitimate debts he had left me with. Even his real estate company, once it was cleared of criminal taint, became part of my business portfolio. Jennifer's fate had been more complicated. The FBI had terminated her consulting contracts and referred her case to federal prosecutors for conducting an unauthorized investigation. But the evidence she had collected was so valuable to multiple ongoing criminal cases that prosecutors offered her a plea agreement, probation and community service in exchange for her full cooperation with official investigations. She had accepted the deal and was now working as a legitimate federal consultant again, though under much closer supervision. We still talked occasionally, our conversations awkward but genuine. She had achieved her goal of destroying the criminal network that killed her sister, but the cost had been her career and her freedom to operate as she had before. "I don't regret it," she had told me during our last conversation. Amelia deserved justice, and Aaron's victims deserved to see him lose everything. The methods were questionable, but the results were exactly what needed to happen. I understood her perspective, even as I struggled with the knowledge that I had been manipulated by someone I trusted. Jennifer's revenge had ultimately saved me from Aaron's betrayal, but it had also made me question my judgment about everyone in my life. The consulting business Jennifer and I had built together was thriving under my sole ownership. The clients we had developed were loyal and profitable, and the skills I had learned about financial analysis and fraud detection during Jennifer's investigation had made me surprisingly effective at helping other small businesses protect themselves from financial crimes. I had also started a foundation to help victims of financial fraud and identity theft, using part of Aaron's recovered assets to provide legal assistance and financial counseling to people who had been victimized by schemes similar to what Aaron had perpetrated. It felt like a way to transform the damage Aaron had caused into something that could help others avoid similar devastation. But the most significant change was internal. The naive trust I had once placed in the people closest to me was gone, replaced by a careful, analytical approach to relationships and business dealings. I verified everything, questioned every financial document, and maintained independent access to all aspects of my financial life. Some might call it paranoia, but I preferred to think of it as education. Aaron had taught me that the people we trust most completely are often the ones with the greatest opportunity to betray us. Jennifer had taught me that even people with good intentions can manipulate us for their own purposes. Both lessons had been painful, but invaluable. The woman who had cried over debt collection notices in her empty kitchen 6 months ago was gone, replaced by someone who understood that financial security required constant vigilance and that trust was a luxury that had to be earned rather than given freely. I raised my coffee cup in a toast to the city spread out below me. To Aaron Richardson, I said aloud, who taught me that the best revenge is living well with everything he thought he could take from me. The view from his former penthouse was spectacular, and it was all mine. The call came on a Tuesday morning, exactly 6 months and 3 days after Aaron's sentencing. I was in my new office, the one I had established in the penthouse that overlooked the same city where Aaron had once conducted his criminal meetings, when my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. Ms. Richardson? The voice was unfamiliar, professional, with a slight accent that made me immediately cautious. My name is Evan Blackwood. I represent certain business interests that were affected by your former husband's legal difficulties. I felt the familiar chill that had become my automatic response to unexpected calls from strangers. What kind of business interests, Mr. Blackwood? The kind that prefer to resolve financial discrepancies through private negotiation rather than public legal proceedings. I believe you recovered certain assets that may not have been entirely your husband's to lose. My hand tightened on the phone. Despite all the federal investigations, despite Aaron's imprisonment and the dismantling of his criminal network, there were still people out there who believed they had legitimate claims to the money I had recovered. Mr. Blackwood, every asset I recovered was legally transferred to me as compensation for identity theft and financial fraud. Those transfers were approved by federal prosecutors and validated by federal courts. Legal ownership and practical ownership are sometimes different concepts, Ms. Richardson. Some of my clients invested substantial resources in your former husband's business ventures with the expectation of specific returns. Your recovery of those assets has created complications. I smiled as I walked to my desk and opened the secure folder I had been hoping to use for months. Mr. Blackwood, I think you should know that I'm no longer the naive woman who trusted explanations about business activities. I've learned quite a lot about financial crimes and federal investigations. I'm sure you have, but federal protection is temporary, and federal attention eventually moves on to other cases. You're absolutely right, I said, pulling out a specific document, which is why I took some additional precautions. Tell me, Does the name Evan Blackwood mean anything to your real employers? Because according to the records I recovered from Aaron's files, Evan Blackwood has been dead for 3 years. You're actually Michael Santos, and you're currently wanted by the FBI for racketeering. The silence on the other end of the line was profound. Furthermore, Michael, this conversation is being recorded and transmitted in real time to Agent Morrison. At the Financial Crimes Division, I believe there's a federal warrant for your arrest that's been outstanding since 2022. You're bluffing. Am I? Agent Morrison, are you there? A new voice came on the line, one I recognized immediately. Mr. Santos, this is Agent Morrison. You're under arrest. Federal agents are currently surrounding your location. I suggest you surrender peacefully. I heard sounds of commotion on the other end, shouting, doors slamming, what sounded like someone running. Then the line went dead. My phone rang again immediately. May, it's Agent Morrison. Outstanding work. Santos was the last major player from Aaron's network who is still operating. This arrest completes our entire case. How did you know he would call? We've been monitoring communications from the remaining criminal associates for months, waiting for someone to be stupid enough to contact you directly. Santos walked right into our trap. I leaned back in my chair, looking out at the city that no longer held any threats or uncertainties for me. So it's really over? It's really over. Aaron's criminal network is completely dismantled. Every major player is either in prison or under arrest. The money laundering operation is shut down permanently, and there's no one left who has any legitimate claim to the assets you recovered. After hanging up with Agent Morrison, I sat quietly in my office for a long time, processing the finality of what had just happened. The last thread connecting me to Aaron's criminal world had been severed. There would be no more threats, no more mysterious phone calls, no more looking over my shoulder. That evening, I hosted a small celebration dinner in the penthouse. Jennifer was there, having completed her community service and fully reinstated as a federal consultant. Agent Morrison attended with his wife, celebrating the successful conclusion of one of the largest financial crime cases in the region's history. Even my sister flew in from Portland, marveling at the transformation in my life. To second chances, Jennifer said, raising her glass of wine, and to the complete destruction of everyone who underestimated May Richardson. As we toasted, I looked around at the home that had once represented Aaron's criminal success and was now the foundation of my legitimate new life. The consulting business was thriving. The foundation had helped hundreds of fraud victims. My personal wealth, recovered from Aaron's hidden assets, was being invested in legitimate businesses and charitable causes. Aaron Richardson had intended to destroy my life as collateral damage in his criminal escape plan. Instead, his betrayal had led to the complete destruction of everything he had built and the creation of something far better in its place. The game was over, and I had won everything. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.